let's move on from that to what's happening in Gaza. They're talking about putting troops in rubble. I read one day, yes, they've divided Gaza and they're in there and they're moving into Gaza. The troops are in Gaza and they're fighting. And I read the next day, well, they're not really in Gaza fighting, but you know, and I'm like, anyway, the concept of going into Gaza fighting in rubble. Your thoughts on the military aspect of the entire Israeli, what is shaping up to be? I thought Ukraine was going to be the mother of all debacles. I guess this will be the father of all debacles. Where Biden has an entire family of all debacles. Scott Ritter.
Well, Israel's doing that which we asked them not to do, which is a full-scale invasion of Gaza. They just have dressed it up. The initial incursions that they went into, if you take a look at the map right now, you see a very impressive drive across the middle of Gaza, splitting it in half into a north and a south. And then you see the Israelis making incursions from the north and then coming down the coastline. Now, if you take that blue, which they've done it in blue, and you remove it, you'll see that this is primarily open spaces. So what Israel's done is avoid all the urban spaces. They've come in and they've gone through the open spaces, and they've done that to surround the place that they bombed the living hell out of. Now they need to go into those urban spaces and clear them out. And this is going to be a completely different game. You know, they sent in Sayat Matkal, the General Reconnaissance Unit, who penetrated into the center of Gaza for a special reconnaissance mission. And then they say, we're in the center of Gaza, we're operating. No, that's just like saying that, we sent, commandos to Desert One during the failed hostage rescue mission and say, we're occupying the central Iran. Really? You're occupying central Iran with a handful of guys on an airplane that have to get the hell out of there when one hits the other. You can't say you're occupying or you have control. You took highly trained troops, they infiltrated in, they did a thing and they came out. That's it. They haven't sent in, a battalion. It's done a fortified position in controlling the space. In fact, they don't control too much space. What you're finding is, even in the open spaces, you see what the bulldozers do now. They're going in through all the sand dunes and everything, and they're leveling them because that's where the tunnels are that Hamas has been popping out. It's not like Hamas never thought that they would do that, though. I can guarantee that Hamas has a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E, all the way down. Hamas has thought this thing through. You can't assume that they haven't, based upon the level of planning that went into their October 7th attack on Israel. That was meticulously planned. You have to believe that they've carried out that same level of planning because they lured Israel in. They're getting Israel to do exactly what they wanted Israel to do, which is to come into Gaza and die a death of 1,000 cuts. I was just reading the other day that that's actually a form of torture that's used on people. You literally kill them with 1,000 cuts, and it's very painful. And, it takes a long time. And that's what Israel's gotten itself into here. It's always risky, Garland, to be sitting here thousands of miles removed from any problem and making pronouncements of this nature based upon an incomplete set of data. I'm not sitting in the Israeli command post. I'm not privy to their plans. It's possible they actually know what they're doing. It's possible that Hamas has overhyped their capabilities, and that, as Seymour Hersh has written in his article, that they're down there gasping from a lack of oxygen in a darkened cave because they've run out of power. The air is bad, the food's rancid, and it's all over. I mean, that's what somebody's telling Seymour Hersh, a Pulitzer Prize winning author who wrote an article. I happen to believe that person's just dead wrong, that that's pure speculation on their part, that Hamas is far more prepared for this than we can possibly imagine. But we don't know. That's the whole point. We don't know what's going on. But what we do know is this, that Israel, when they stress tested their defense force capacity last year in Chariots of Fire, this year in Firm Hand, a full scope and scale stress test of what happens if everybody comes at us at once, that Israel didn't plan for this. Israel planned for the main fight being with Hezbollah up north. And that's where the bulk of the Israeli army would go, up north. They have a plan for that. Israel planned for fighting in the Golan Heights. Israel planned for a strategic war with Iran. What Israel planned for the West Bank and for Gaza was civil unrest and terrorist attacks. Israel did not plan for what happened on October 7th. They didn't plan for Hamas to come over the wall and tactically defeat the Israeli army in a stand-up fight, because they did. I think people need to understand that there were 2 battalions of the Golani Brigade that were deployed on combat duty on the Gazan border, and they got beat by Hamas in a stand-up fight. And the Golani is one of the best brigades that Israel has. The 13th Battalion, the 51st Battalion. They got beat. They got overrun. They got pushed back. It's a military fight, guys. It's a military fight. And the 300,000 troops that they've mobilized, they don't have a contingency plan for that. There's nowhere in the Israeli file cabinet is there a contingency plan for what to do when Hamas comes over the wall, bitch slaps us around, pushes us out, take hostages, and pull back. They don't have a contingency plan for that because they never imagined it. They never imagined it. So everything they're doing right now is a hip shoot. It's a hip shoot operation. So when they're going into Gaza, it's not like they thought this thing through. They're going into Gaza right now every day going, what are we going to do tomorrow? Well, what's the plan today? How are we going to do this? Okay, we've occupied this. What's our next step? And it leads to a lot of indecision. It leads to a lot of mistakes. And you're already getting Israeli officers coming out from within Gaza saying, this is the biggest goat rope we've ever seen in our life. And it's costing us lives. People are making errors. We don't know what we're doing. We're just going from here to here to here. We're moving around. I mean, it looks good when the Israelis publish their videos that show the tanks going down the road and firing a round off into a building. And you're like, hey, blew something up. And you see the infantry walking around looking like infantry, and you're like, wow, the Israelis are moving. But you do know that you can do the same thing and accomplish absolutely nothing, because you're simply moving troops from point A to point B with no real tactical purpose. Why are they advancing? What is the purpose of the advance? Is there an enemy objective they're trying to take, or is it merely a presence that they're establishing a presence? And establishing a presence isn't really a sound tactical procedure, because a presence of what? You're above the ground establishing presence on an anthill. And they come up out of the ground at night, and they're inflicting casualties on the Israelis every night. 5 vehicles, 10 vehicles, 5 dead Israelis, 12 dead Israelis. We're 30 days into this thing, and you're going to just watch as this thing continues. The casualties are going to just continue to rise and rise and rise. And it's only going to get worse as they get into the rubble. Again, I just asked the historians out there, look what happened when the Germans brought in their special pioneer sapper units in October of 1942 to win the final battle of the Barakati factory. As a battle that had to be fought because Germany bombed the factory and the Soviets were dug into the factory. They sent their elite combat engineer units in there, slaughtered, wiped out, couldn't do it. What happened to the Americans, the Poles, the British, the Indians, the New Zealanders at Monte Cassino when we blew up this ancient religious place, dropped it down, made a rubble of it in the village, and the 6th Airborne Division of the Germans went underground. We kept trying to take it. We never really took it. We outflanked them and they withdrew. So then we occupied it. But as long as they defended that space, we couldn't take it. And this is just above ground. Talk to the Marines at Suribachi, talk to the Marines at Iwo Jima as they advanced on this tiny little island that had 14 kilometers of tunnels underground, and how the Japanese kept popping up and shooting them, popping up behind them. They'd advance, the Japanese come up behind them. I mean, it drove the Marines crazy. We lost a lot of Marines because of that, and that was with a desert island on top. Now you combine a Stalingrad-like collapsed urban environment with an Iwo Jima-like tunnel system underneath, and it is a nightmare. And if you haven't planned for this, you don't have a plan. And that's the problem with the Israelis right now. They don't have a plan. They don't have a political plan. They made these harsh statements. First of all, we have to understand this, Garland. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying things that he's not going to be around to see implemented. He's a failed politician. He's a man who oversaw the greatest defeat of Israel in Israeli history. He's a disgraced politician. Thousands of Israelis are protesting outside of his residence right now, demanding his immediate resignation. It's only going to get bigger. This is on top of the hundreds of thousands of Israelis that were demanding his resignation before October 7th because of his rewriting of Israeli basic law to, disenfranchise the judiciary so he couldn't be held accountable for corruption charges. This is a corrupt individual who is a failed politician overseeing a panicked administration, desperately trying to make themselves relevant by speaking the language of war, when the fact is they're not going to be there when it's time to negotiate the peace. So I would take everything that Benjamin Netanyahu says and flush it down the toilet of life, because somebody else who isn't named Netanyahu is going to be around when this thing comes to an end, because he's done. He's finished. So are the generals. You see the Minister of Defense Gallant out there every day talking tough, talking. How tough were you on October 7th, Gallant? You failure, you loser. You were part of that team that was talking. When they find out, when the Israelis finally wake up to what happened, that on the night of October 6th, October 7th, Gallant, the head of intelligence, Mossad, military intelligence, all got together and they were reading the intelligence reports sent by these young ladies, these observers on the wall, these other people right on the front line saying, hey guys, they're coming over tonight. They're coming over tonight. We need you to sound the alarm. We need you to call up the reserves. We need you to get ready because they're coming tonight. And they all looked at that and went, yeah, we'll sleep on this. Put it away, woke up in the morning. They came over. When this comes out, that they didn't order a stand to, they didn't bring everybody up on high alert, they didn't sound the alarms in the kibbutz so that the security forces could get out of bed, arm themselves, and assume their defensive posture. They didn't bring up the reinforcements. They didn't get the helicopters in the air. They didn't do any of that. When that comes out, how much political viability do you think these people have? None.